Hi everybody, I'm Bree the Plant Lady checking in with a poppy and direct sowing update. I'm going to go through all of the beds that I have showed different approaches for direct seeding starting in November going all the way through February so that we can do a tally to see what looks best so that we will all move forward with better information on when the ideal sow dates are for poppies, larkspur, and so much more. So let's start right here behind me. These are self-sown poppies and larkspur. So this bed has been really functional in being a self-seeded bed, especially with arugula, which is all that white that you see blooming right now. And poppies and larkspur also have kind of naturalized in here. And so you can see these are a really nice size. And they are really starting to get bigger. I think with some good rainfall that we have predicted later this week, you're gonna really see these jump and get ready to start blooming. Right across the walk from there, more self-sown poppies and larkspur. And yeah, these are about at the right normal stage for this time of year. They're starting to elongate. And you know, by the end of this, when they start blooming, these will all be about 4 foot tall. So you won't even be able to see the ground once these really start to jump in size. Now you might recognize this bed. This is a video that I did back in late January. And I was seeding a bunch of different things, including crimson clover right here, and mustard. This is southern giant curled. But this is a bed that I was explaining is filled with perennials. And at the time, you know, I had mown it down. All this phlox was dormant. But you see how the phlox has really taken over. So there's little areas where the stuff I seeded has filled in the gaps, like right there. But for the most part, this bed is doing exactly what I predicted it would do, which was come back to life with the perennials. So it's really hard to do this method of annual spring seed mixed with perennials because the perennials kind of take over. But in the pockets where I don't have phlox, the self-sown larkspur here, which gets full sun, is already really starting to develop its flower stalk. You see, it's got a nice upright habit. So these are going to be blooming really soon. Now here's a bed that I sowed, and you can always tell when I sow it because it's really dense. And yeah, these aren't getting as big, but they still will flower, and I stand by not thinning these out, though you totally could if you wanted. This border is really nice and full. I've done a pretty okay job of weeding out the problem plants, but you can see I love the texture of having direct seeded cilantro mixed in, because that's going to have a nice little white flower. It'll look really great against the brilliant colors of the poppies. Of course, the barley is all starting. Actually, this isn't barley, this is wheat. It's so beautiful. So this bed, which I had sown with poppies, still has quite a few. You see all that seafoam green. But I had to weed a lot out of here because this is where I had that major chickweed infestation. So this is where I planted kohlrabi recently. And you can see the cabbage worms have been in here. So I need to get this dealt with. I need to put out some BT. So that I don't lose this kohlrabi crop to those stinking worms. There's just no question, self-sown is always the most efficient. It's the fastest. Here I've got larkspur. You see the buds are already starting to develop. And right over here, look, they're about to open. This will be open probably by tomorrow. So if you can allow these to get established in self-sow, that will actually give you a leg up on the process and take the work out. You don't actually have to collect the seed and sow them yourself. And there's a huge difference in self-sown size. I mean, that's really the lesson of today. everything that I did, even ideally timed in late November, significantly smaller compared to the stuff that planted itself. I mean, look at this poppy here is already starting to develop its flower stalk. So that'll be blooming, you know, really quickly. Now, of course, this bed is always the earliest place for my poppies to start. That's because it's full southern facing, and especially the self-sown poppies that are right along the brick foundation. Look at how big those have gotten. Look at that. So there's a big difference in allowing these to self-sow versus casting the seed yourself. So those are self-sown. These I sowed. Big difference in size. Again, this bed is full of self-sown larkspur along with lemonium, or the money plant, which has just started to bloom, and then a whole bunch of different perennials. But you see here, there's flower buds starting to develop, so this will be blooming really soon. So in this front foundation bed, which we actually did a video for Jim Putnam's channel, HortTube, showing the exact how-to on this, and you can see the bachelor buttons are getting ready to start flowering. In fact, they are, look, they're showing buds, a little bit of bud color. This is going to be a blue one. And then behind that are the really densely planted larkspur and poppies. And they're a little behind, but they will gain steam. This just shows you how when you intentionally plant them, they really will grow. This was done, I think, just like late November or early December on bare compost, direct seeded. It's grown out all winter. So in contrast to that bed, we have the area where I just tossed seeds. Remember, I said I wanted to do this as an experiment. And now, granted, there are a few things that are going against making this really successful. Partly, my neighbor dogs like to run through here. They basically like run in circles. But I am pleased to show you that there are poppies germinating. That's what this is. And over here, that's what those all are. So I count that as a success. Now granted, you know, this is nice, loose soil that I've amended with a lot of compost over the years, but I didn't do anything. You saw it in the video. I just tossed the seed to see what would happen, and it is not a failure. So you have it from me. Seed sowing time on this was Black Friday, day after Thanksgiving here. So that's ideal. And then around all of that is self-sown nigella. And this is a bed that I've just always had a really strong stand of nigella. Like for 10 years now, it just kind of does its job and fills in the openings around the edge and really just softens this bed. So the wave is the bed that I also did on Black Friday, and I am, you know, I love how the barley looks. The barley is the priority in this bed, but I really wanted this to be a solid combination of barley, poppies, and larkspur. And Lord knows I sowed enough poppies, but there just aren't very many in here. And so I don't know if that's the competition of the barley. There's a good amount of larkspur that's coming up, especially sort of in these open areas along the edge. And I have a handful of poppies, like here's one. But I think my dream of having a mixed field of barley and poppies, this is about the 4th year I've tried to do it, and it's never worked out. So there's something about that combination that doesn't work. I'm going to need to do some research to figure out why, because I don't have an explanation. Now in this part of the wave, which is really shady now because, you know, my trees are starting to get big. When I first planted this garden, there were no trees here. None whatsoever. This was a tobacco field. So I had full sun all day, and I hated it because I worked at a nursery where I specialized in shade-loving plants. I couldn't grow any of those things here. But now I have shade and I'm freaking out because I want all my sun-loving plants that I've gotten used to. But this is a great example of a bed that the larkspur has just naturalized in here. I didn't sow any of this. The larkspur, mustard, and a few poppies have all just volunteered. And I am so grateful for that. I love plants that volunteer. You can always get rid of them, but boy, it's nice when you don't actually have to distribute all that seed. So I made a video earlier this year showing how to plant these ornamental plants. These are all things from First Editions. And then I seeded in like lettuce and mustard, what we call spicy green mix, to help prevent some weeds. And so you see, I didn't have great coverage with my seed distribution, but it's still interesting, and this is definitely at a stage where I can start harvesting some nice tender salad greens. But the question that keeps coming up is, what about those poppies that you sowed in February? And here's the bed, okay? Now, those daikon radish that are flowering right here, that was volunteer. I didn't plant that. But if you remember, I sowed greens, same like lettuce mix, in this bed, and that's what's growing all through here. But when you really examine this bed, there's no poppies. No poppies germinated. So I don't have the answer as to why the poppies that I sowed in February didn't work. Like, in theory, they should have germinated. The seed was stored in a refrigerator, so technically it was stratified. I don't understand why. I just know that the end of November, beginning of December is the ideal time for sowing poppies, larkspur, and all of those spring flowering things. And I need to do some research to really figure out the science behind why. I do this because this is what I was taught from a lifelong gardener who knows a heck of a lot more than me. And so sometimes you just have habits and you don't question why. But it's also important to recognize that those habits are sound and useful. And in the case of poppies, I stand by my advice. Zones 6 through 8, you need to sow them at Thanksgiving. They need light to germinate, so put down a layer of compost, direct seed your poppies, walk away, let them germinate in place. Put it on your calendars, it just becomes part of your Thanksgiving ritual. So I know that I have shown you these poppies many times. These are obviously self-sown. I would have never planted them in the middle of the walkway. But look at how enormous they are. And I have a feeling these will probably be the first ones to flower. And then moving along over to here, this is really the border I'm most excited about. You can see just how big everything is. And this is like a pretty good mix of larkspur and poppies together. So I think this is going to be really beautiful. And same thing with this border. This is a whole bunch of self-sown aquilegia, which is just getting ready to start to bloom. It's the columbine. But then all behind here, this is just going to be the most dynamic, colorful display of poppies. I'm super stoked to be able to see all of this grow out. But then again, you have it, and you can really see this microclimate from the bottles in action. But look at how big those self-sown poppies are. Taking advantage of that warm heat sink as a result of using these bottles as edging. So I often get asked if I grow Eschscholzia, the California poppy, and the answer is yes. I don't grow it as well as I do Pephaver somniferum, which is, you know, all that. But I wanted to show you here, I actually have both growing, which is probably not good because the Eschscholzia is so much smaller. And that is this sort of ferny leaf, very silvery foliage thing. And then the more rosette-like structure, that's Pephaver somniferum, which grows significantly taller. But Eschscholzia is, you know, it has a small bright orange, although I think this was a variety that's a little bit different. I'll have to look. I made a YouTube video of when I did this area, I think back in December. I'll need to re-watch it to actually remember what the cultivar was, but I'm really pleased to see so much germination of the California poppy in this bed, and I think it looks really nice, you know, mixed in with lettuce and garlic, which are some of the other things that are planted in this border. So this south-facing property border is like right on the verge of exploding into flower. And I seeded a lot in here, but a lot of this is also self-sown. And everything is just, it's super dense. It's exactly what I'm trying to achieve. Not having big areas of open mulch space so that weeds can't establish. That is always my goal. Actually letting some of these brassicas go to seed to help provide nectar for pollinators. And these clumps of greens interspersed are gonna look really dynamic against all of this larkspur, which is what all of that kind of ferny leaf green is. This, I think I'm gonna count this bed as a super success. You know, I think the main lesson to learn from all of this is that nature really does its job. So when you allow things to just grow on their own, they are still going to be more robust than when you are more involved in the process. But either way, I hope that you will be encouraged in the future to do this direct sowing method so that you can create a glorious springtime display. And I absolutely cannot wait to share updates with you when all of this bursts into flower in just a few days, really. So I appreciate all of you asking these questions, and I look forward to giving you updates. Thank you so much for watching.